It happened in less than 10 seconds, yet it shattered years of quiet dignity. A successful CEO stepped off her gleaming corporate helicopter, laughed at the battered old chopper parked beside the runway, and mocked the single father polishing its faded nose with his own hands. The airport staff lowered their eyes in embarrassment, expecting the humble mechanic to walk away in silence. None of them realized the woman had just landed on an airfield that legally belonged to the very man she had ridiculed. Before the afternoon ended, she would discover that the wealth she admired had nothing to do with expensive aircraft, and everything to do with the strength of a father who had sacrificed everything for the child he loved. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances still matter in this world, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our community every morning. Before the first aircraft touched the runway, Colton Hayes arrived with his young daughter, Maren. The old helicopter parked near the maintenance hangar had become a familiar sight to every pilot who visited Ashcroft Airfield. Its paint had faded beneath decades of sunlight, its metal carried scratches earned through thousands of rescue flights, and its engines sang with the rough honesty of age instead of the polished whisper of modern luxury. Most visitors assumed the aircraft belonged to a struggling mechanic who simply refused to let go of an outdated machine. Few knew the truth. Fewer still understood why Colton never corrected anyone. Years earlier, Colton had inherited the airfield from his grandfather, a former search and rescue pilot who believed every landing represented another chance at life. Instead of selling the valuable property to developers offering fortunes, Colton preserved it as a community airport that trained volunteer rescue pilots, hosted charity medical flights, and provided discounted fuel to emergency crews. The business earned enough to support itself comfortably, but Colton reinvested nearly every dollar back into the airfield. When his wife passed away after a sudden illness, everything changed. He became both father and mother to 6-year-old Maren. He traded expensive suits for work boots, hired managers to oversee investments while he personally repaired aircraft, and spent every free afternoon helping his daughter with homework beneath the shadow of the control tower. He discovered that grief could either harden a heart or deepen it, and he chose the second path every single day. Across the country, Cecily Rowan had built one of the fastest-growing aviation technology companies in North America. Brilliant, ambitious, and relentlessly driven, she had transformed a struggling startup into an international success before turning 40. Business magazines praised her fearless leadership, investors celebrated her confidence, and competitors feared her determination. Success, however, had quietly reshaped her perspective. She had begun judging people by appearances long before learning their stories. Expensive watches, private jets, luxury offices, and polished presentations became shortcuts in her mind. She believed excellence always looked expensive. That belief followed her as her sleek helicopter settled onto Ashcroft Airfield beneath a cloudless afternoon sky. She had arrived to inspect the property before finalizing plans to build a state-of-the-art aviation innovation center nearby. Her advisors believed the aging community airport would eventually agree to sell. They assumed every owner had a price. As Cecily crossed the tarmac, her attention drifted toward the old helicopter where Colton carefully wiped oil from a repaired engine panel while Maren handed him clean tools with enormous pride. The weathered aircraft seemed almost comical beside her company's immaculate helicopter. Unable to resist, Cecily smiled with quiet amusement and remarked loudly enough for nearby employees to hear that some people spent more time preserving museum pieces than building a future. She suggested the old helicopter belonged in a scrapyard instead of an airport. Several employees chuckled politely. Colton simply smiled at his daughter. Maren looked confused. She loved that helicopter because it reminded her of stories about her grandfather saving hikers, rescuing flood victims, and carrying emergency doctors into isolated mountain towns. Colton gently brushed dust from the aircraft and continued working without responding. The silence somehow felt stronger than any argument. Minutes later, the airport operations manager greeted Cecily with formal documents. Everything changed when she reached the ownership records. Ashcroft Airfield owner, Colton Hayes. Her confident expression froze. The mechanic standing beside the faded helicopter wasn't an employee. He wasn't a caretaker. He wasn't struggling to survive. He owned every runway, every hangar, every building, every acre surrounding the place where her helicopter rested. Embarrassment arrived faster than pride could defend against it. She glanced back across the runway. Colton was kneeling beside Marin, laughing as they struggled to tighten a stubborn bolt together. There was no anger on his face, only patience. Cecily suddenly realized she knew absolutely nothing about the man she had judged. Instead of leaving immediately, she asked for a complete tour of the airfield. The operations manager happily agreed. As they walked beneath the bright afternoon sun, Cecily expected to discover outdated facilities barely surviving. Instead, she found something extraordinary. The Rescue Training Center had produced hundreds of volunteer pilots. The maintenance school offered free apprenticeships for veterans rebuilding civilian careers. The medical transport program had flown thousands of patients without charging families unable to afford emergency aviation. Scholarship plaques covered an entire hallway. Photographs showed smiling children whose lives had been saved because aircraft launched from this modest airfield. Every success story carried one name repeatedly: Colton Hayes. She quietly asked why none of this appeared in magazines. The manager smiled. Because Mr. Hayes never invites reporters. He says kindness loses something the moment it becomes advertising. Those words settled heavily inside Cecily's heart. Later that afternoon, she watched Colton helping a nervous teenage student complete her first solo helicopter inspection. He praised every improvement instead of criticizing every mistake. Confidence slowly replaced fear across the young mechanic's face. Marin watched nearby with obvious admiration. She wasn't proud because her father owned an airfield. She was proud because everyone respected the way he treated people. Cecily remembered growing up with her own father, a factory electrician who believed character mattered more than income. She remembered promising herself success would never change her heart. Somewhere along the journey, she had broken that promise. A sudden emergency interrupted everyone's thoughts. A rescue helicopter requested immediate assistance after reporting mechanical trouble while transporting an injured mountain climber toward the regional hospital. Without hesitation, Colton sprinted toward his old helicopter. Airport staff moved with practiced precision. Within minutes, the weathered aircraft everyone had quietly underestimated thundered into the sky. Cecily watched in disbelief. The aging helicopter climbed confidently with remarkable stability despite its appearance. The operations manager explained that Colton personally rebuilt every critical component using modern engineering while preserving the aircraft's historic airframe. It looked old. Mechanically, it was exceptional. Nearly an hour later, the helicopter returned safely after escorting the damaged rescue aircraft home. The injured climber reached an ambulance alive. Pilots applauded. Ground crews smiled with visible relief. Colton climbed from the cockpit exhausted but grateful. His first concern wasn't recognition. He simply asked whether the patient would recover. The answer was yes. He quietly thanked everyone who had helped. Cecily felt something inside herself cracking. She had spent years measuring achievement by financial growth. Colton measured success by lives improved. Those were completely different currencies. That afternoon she approached him with sincere humility. She admitted her mistake without making excuses. She confessed she had judged him within seconds based on appearance alone. Colton listened carefully. He didn't rush to forgive. He didn't pretend the words hadn't hurt. Instead, he looked toward Marin, who was feeding crumbs to small birds gathering near the hangar. He explained that children learn how to value themselves by watching adults value others. Every careless judgment eventually reaches innocent ears. His calm honesty pierced deeper than anger ever could. Cecily realized her comment hadn't merely insulted a helicopter. It had risked teaching a little girl that appearances determine worth. Tears quietly filled her eyes. For the first time in many years, success felt painfully empty. During the following weeks, Cecily returned repeatedly to Ashcroft Airfield. Not because negotiations continued, because she wanted to understand. She volunteered. During youth aviation workshops, she funded new safety equipment anonymously. She spent afternoons listening to veterans whose lives had been rebuilt through Colton's apprenticeship program. Each visit reminded her that leadership wasn't about standing above people. It was about lifting them higher. Her executives noticed changes inside the company. Employee recognition programs expanded. Scholarships replaced luxury conference gifts. Mental health support increased. Executive bonuses were partially redirected into community aviation education. Profits remained strong. Respect grew even stronger. Months later, Cecily publicly announced that her innovation center would not replace Ashcroft Airfield. Instead, it would be built beside it through a long-term partnership, preserving every historic runway while creating opportunities for future generations. Industry analysts called it an unexpected business decision. Those who knew the real story called it wisdom. On opening day, hundreds of families gathered beneath another brilliant afternoon sky. Children explored aircraft displays. Former rescue patients reunited with pilots who had once saved them. Veterans proudly demonstrated skills learned through the maintenance academy. Marin stood beside her father wearing oversized safety headphones and smiling brighter than the sunlight surrounding the runway. During the ceremony, Cecily surprised everyone. She unveiled a restored exhibit honoring historic rescue aviation. At its center stood Colton's old helicopter, carefully preserved between active service missions as a living reminder that true value often hides beneath worn paint. A bronze plaque carried words chosen by Cecily herself: never measure a person's worth by what shines on the outside, because the greatest hearts often travel in the humblest machines. The audience applauded. Colton remained characteristically quiet. Recognition had never been his destination. Watching children dream beside aircraft was enough. Before we reach the end of this story, take a moment to leave a meaningful comment and tell us what lesson touched your heart the most. Have you ever discovered that someone you underestimated became one of the greatest people you had ever met? Your story may inspire someone else today. Years later, visitors still arrived expecting to admire sleek corporate helicopters, yet many found themselves drawn toward the weathered old aircraft parked near the training hangar. Guides happily explained that it had never been the fastest or the prettiest helicopter on the field. It simply carried the greatest number of stories about courage, sacrifice, compassion, and hope. Children climbed into the cockpit with wide eyes, imagining futures built not on wealth alone but on service. Marin eventually became a rescue pilot herself, carrying forward her father's quiet belief that every takeoff should create another chance for someone waiting desperately below. Cecily often stood beside the runway watching those flights disappear into the bright blue sky, grateful that one embarrassing afternoon had rescued something far more valuable than her reputation. It had rescued the compassion she thought success had buried forever. And every time Colton looked at the old helicopter that had once been mocked, he smiled, knowing that the strongest people never need to prove their value. Time, kindness, and integrity always do it for them. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May we all remember that the greatest treasures in life are not found in polished appearances, but in humble hearts that choose kindness even when the world gives them every reason not to.